Thank you, Ambassador. That was a great speech and presentation. We're very proud to have you.
Thank you, sir.
Our audience in San Jose, I've got some questions from them, and I'd like to ask you if you please answer us.
I'm ready.
Okay. Its first question has to do with the U.S. government and the government of Saddam Hussein early in the 80s. What did the U.S. know of the atrocity Saddam was committing in the 80s? What was the U.S. policy regarding those atrocities?
Well, in the 80s, before things really got tough, Saddam Hussein was fighting a war against Iran. We thought that was a good thing for him to do, and we spent a fair bit of effort supporting him because we saw Iran as a much bigger threat than Iraq, and so we were backing him and did not pay any attention at all. I mean, that's, you know, that's what you do. Things done by your friends are good things, things done by your enemies are bad things.
So it's about the same question. I'm just going to ask it again because somebody else asked me this. I would really like to find out how involved the U.S. was in the early years of Saddam's reign. Were you involved with Saddam or?
No, I had, you know, my predecessor, me, and the people who came after me had very little to do with Saddam Hussein or with the senior leadership. America and Iraq did not have very good relations. When I first went there, it was still Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr who was in charge. And even at the foreign ministry, we dealt at below the top levels. I never met with Saadun Hamadi, who was the foreign minister. I met him in New York, but I never saw him again.
Great.
I met with his deputies.
Another question that has to do with the Iraq-Iran war. Did we really encourage Iraq's invasion of Iran?
Well, no, and of course, the phrase that you use, Iraq's invasion of Iran, Iran and Iraq had already done things to each other before then. It wasn't like one day they decided to start a war. It was merely a situation in which the Iraqis, deeply concerned about what the Ayatollah was doing in trying to stir up the Shia, decided to go to war. It was not like Israel's invasion of Lebanon, for example, which is an entirely different kind of thing.
The next question is, there was a meeting between Bob Dole and Saddam Hussein. And what flow of information passed, if you know of any, between Bob Dole and Saddam in the early 1990s during that state visit? It was mere months later that Saddam invaded Kuwait. I wonder if Saddam did the invasion thinking that there were or might have been support from the U.S. for it.
Well, I don't think so. That's a idea put forward fairly frequently. I believe Saddam invaded Kuwait because he thought he was doing the right thing. And whether Americans supported it or opposed it, you know, he was going to do it anyhow.
So that was the case. After the invasion of Kuwait, when Iraq pulled out of Kuwait, there was a revolt in the south, and the U.S. refused to aid the revolts that broke out in the southern Iraq following the Gulf War. Why did we keep out of Iraq's internal dispute at that time, but invaded Iraq now to create a regime change?
Well, I don't know. That's a tough one. People in America have always said that we should have gone on into Baghdad in 1991 and, quotes, finish the job. Well, what the hell does that mean, finish the job? How would it have worked out? What would have happened? Who knows? I think we didn't get involved in those difficulties because the Arab world said, stay out. Stay out. You can push Iraq out of Kuwait because that's a UN mandate, but you are not authorized to overthrow the regime or get involved in its internal affairs. When it happened, many years later, there was no Soviet Union any longer for us to worry about.
Now, this has to do with the weapons of mass destruction.
Yes.
It has been reported in the alternative media that Saddam received some of his weapons of mass destruction, or maybe some of units of that weapon that was used against Iran from the U.S. Did we sell him weapons of mass destruction?
I don't know whether we sold him weapons of mass destruction. I really don't, because I was out of the government, out of the Middle East by then. But it is perfectly clear that we did give him intelligence. We gave him some anthrax. We gave him helicopters. And we were selling him a lot of things And I have no way of knowing whether or not they were involved with the production of weapons of mass. We gave them anthrax, for example. But anthrax is not necessarily a weapon of mass destruction. It depends how you use it. Yeah. We gave it to them for the purpose of, you know, creating chemicals to use to fight diseases.
Okay. Something that happened during the Iran-Iraq war. Iraq bombed one of our warships in the Persian Gulf.
Yes.
That incident was hushed up quickly as the attack on the Liberty by Israel. Doesn't that reveal a closeness between Saddam's government and ours at that time?
Well, you know, I don't think so. The attack on the Liberty was really hushed up, but when the Iraqi warplanes fired those Exocet missiles into the destroyer, that was covered in the news fairly openly. So that they had did it, there was a case of mistaken identity, and they said, oops, sorry about this. Okay. Israel never did that with the case of the Liberty. Okay. And if you remember, in the case of the Liberty, Israel, you know, machine gunned the lifeboats and attacked with submarines and airplanes and surface ships. I mean, no, whole different kind of thing. The Iraqis essentially said, oops, excuse us, big difference.
Okay. This question you probably answered in your speech, just you could maybe touch on it. What does Ambassador Peck see as the true rationale for the invasion of Iraq?
Well, it's difficult for someone like me to answer that because I'm not a subscriber to the policy for a new American century. The invasion of Iraq is part of this policy, which is based upon U.S. domination of the world, starting in the Middle East, taking over Iraq for the purpose of establishing an aircraft carrier through which we can guarantee the flow of oil, protect Israel's security, and go about changing the rest of the governments in the region. And I think that this is being done because Israel sees Iraq as a major threat. Not anymore. Not anymore.
One last question, that's my question. In the 50s, there was the Baghdad Pact, and Iraq was one of the key players in the Baghdad Pact. And the report I heard 10 years ago about Iraq was that America looks at Iraq as the threshold for the West to the Middle East after the removal of the Shah and destruction of Lebanon. Maybe that is wrong or right, I don't know, but that was something that kind of like I heard about. Do you think that Iraq would have a role in the future to be a leader in the Middle East for the Arab world, for the West, and be friendly with the West and live happily ever after?
I think that is perhaps a little too optimistic. It is clear that Iraq could play some kind of a role depending upon what happens to it now. Does it splinter apart? Does it stay together? Does it organize itself in a way which gives national cohesion? Does America slice it up into three pieces? Those things are tough to say. I have a feeling myself, which doesn't mean I'm right. I have a feeling that America's interests in Iraq are not in the interests of the Arab world. Well, yeah, Israel it could be, I suppose, but also because we want to use Iraq for our own purposes and not for anything that the Iraqis are interested in.
What could that be? Oil?
Oil, stability, air bases, control, domination. The word, I guess the word we'd have to use is hegemony. We, in order to be the hegemon in the Middle East, take Iraq.
Mr. Ambassador, it was very pleasure to see you, watch you tonight, hear you. Everything was wonderful. We really are very proud,
sir,
as an Arab American, to have you on board.
You're very kind.
Have you here.
Thank you very much. Good night, sir.
Good night.
Ooh, I don't.